All right, let's kick things off. Something that keeps coming up, thanks partly to listeners like Darren, is this whole idea of really understanding why we believe what we do.
It's fundamental.
Yeah, exactly. It got us thinking, how can we, get a better handle on the foundations of our own knowledge?
It's a great question.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into something called a belief journal.
Right.
Think of it as maybe a personal expedition into your own mind, your own thinking.
I like that. An expedition.
Our mission for you listening is pretty straightforward. Figure out how keeping one of these journals can help you learn more thoroughly and maybe, just maybe, spark some of those aha moments about how you think.
Those are the best moments.
Absolutely. Ever find yourself holding a belief really strongly, but if someone pushed you, you'd struggle to explain exactly why?
Oh, definitely. It happens to everyone, I think.
That's the kind of tangle a belief journal can help unravel. So what exactly is this thing?
Okay, so at its core, a belief journal is basically your personal space for, let's call it, ongoing mental housekeeping.
Housekeeping, okay.
Yeah, it's where you actively look at your beliefs. Not just making a list, but really digging into how they showed up in the first place, and crucially, how confident you actually are in them.
So less about, I believe X, and more about, okay, why do I believe X, and how sure am I really?
Exactly. You're sort of becoming a detective of your own mind.
A mind detective. I like that.
You investigate the methods, the ways you arrived at your beliefs, and you ask that big question, are these methods actually reliable for finding out what's true?
Okay, so the how is just as important as the what.
Absolutely. You track your beliefs. You notice when your certainty maybe goes up or down. You're consciously looking for biases, those little mental shortcuts, and also thinking about other ways people might see the same thing.
Okay, that makes sense. So how does this mental detective work play out? Like day to day, what are the steps?
Well, it kind of boils down to a few key actions. First, you got to identify a belief you want to look at. Probably something that feels, significant to you.
Right, not just anything.
Then comes the detective work we mentioned. Tracing its origins. Where did it come from? What convinced you? What evidence? What reasoning? And this is super important. How reliable do you judge those sources or methods to be?
Okay, the reliability check.
Then you put a number on your confidence.
Yeah.
Usually like 0 to 100% is common.
Right.
And critically, you reflect on those potential biases and actively look for different perspectives. And finally, you track changes. How does the belief or your confidence evolve?
Wow, okay. That sounds quite intentional, very deliberate.
It is. It's about being conscious about your thinking.
So if someone's listening now and thinking, all right, I'm curious, I want to try this, how do they actually, start first step?
The very first step is just practical. Pick a format that works for you.
Okay.
Are you a pen and paper person? Physical notebook? Or maybe digital? A document on your laptop? Maybe even a special journaling app? The main thing is choosing something you'll actually stick with.
Makes sense. Consistency is key. Format chosen. What's next?
Next, maybe just brainstorm some of your core beliefs. Think really broadly here.
Like across different areas of life.
Exactly. Personal stuff, relationships, values, maybe spiritual or political ideas, even scientific concepts you take as true. Just get a diverse snapshot.
Like taking an inventory of your mental furniture.
That's a good way to put it. An intellectual inventory.
Okay, inventory done. We have a list. What info do we need for each item on that list?
Right. So for each belief, you need to capture some key details. Start with the belief itself. State it as clearly, as precisely as you can.
Why the precision?
Because vagueness makes it really hard to examine properly. If it's complex, maybe break it down. Instead of, say, social media is bad, try something more specific like, using social media for more than an hour a day negatively impacts my mood.
Gotcha. Specificity helps focus the investigation. What else?
Then you really got to dig into its origin story. How did it actually get into your head? Was it a specific experience, something someone you trust told you? Did you research it? Or did it just sort of seep in over time?
That passive absorption thing.
Exactly. And ask yourself honestly, did I actively choose this belief? Or did I just kind of inherit it without much thought?
Ooh, that's a challenging question. Makes you really think about your own role.
It does. And then, like we said, assess your confidence.
Right, the 0-100 scale.
Yep, assign that score. But don't just, pluck a number from the air. Think about why that number. High confidence should ideally come from using reliable methods, ways of knowing that generally lead to truth.
So the confidence number isn't just about how strongly I feel, it's tied to the trustworthiness of how I got the belief.
You got it. That
Mm.
link is crucial. And also think about what could change your mind.
What would it take?
Yeah, what new evidence or argument could lower your confidence or even make you abandon the belief? This shows how open you are to revision. And finally, for each belief, really try to explore the other side. Counter-arguments, alternative views. The key is trying to state them fairly, in their strongest form, even if you disagree.
That requires some real intellectual honesty, steel manning the opposition.
It does. It's not easy, but it's valuable. Subscribing is the only way to keep the cows from learning TikTok dances.
Yeah, we have to protect the internet.
Subscribe today.
You also mentioned doing regular reviews. Why is looking back at entries so important?
The reviews. They turn it from a static snapshot into a dynamic process, like an ongoing conversation with yourself.
Right.
Maybe weekly, maybe monthly, whatever works. It lets you see things with fresh eyes, add new beliefs, update old entries based on new learning or just deeper thinking.
Checking in with your past self's reasoning.
Exactly. And seeing how things have shifted.
Now, you also mentioned applying frameworks. Can you give us an example or two of what that looks like in practice?
Sure. A really useful one is called reliabilism.
Reliabilism.
Think of it like checking the quality of a tool. Does this tool work consistently? Does it do its job well? For beliefs, it asks, how reliable are the methods I use to form this belief? Do they have a good track record for getting to the truth?
So you're rating the method itself.
Yeah, you could even give each method you use, like personal experience or expert testimony, a score, maybe 1 to 10 on reliability.
Yeah.
Scientific research might score high, maybe a gut feeling scores lower. And ask, could this method easily lead different people to opposite conclusions? That's often a sign of lower reliability.
That makes a lot of sense. Evaluating the process, not just believing the output. What's another one?
Another good one is the outsider test.
Just outsider test.
Yeah. Imagine someone from a totally different culture, different background, different assumptions. How would they see your belief and the evidence you have for it?
Trying to get perspective.
Exactly. Would they find your reasoning convincing? Or is it maybe tied up too much in your own specific bubble, your own context? It forces you to check if your justifications have broader appeal.
That's a powerful technique for spotting assumptions. And lastly, you stress being honest. Seems simple, but why the emphasis?
Because ultimately this journal is for you, for your own understanding, your own growth.
Right. No one else is grading it.
Exactly. There's zero benefit in pretending you formed a belief super logically if you didn't, or saying you're 100% confident when you have doubts. The more raw and honest you are with yourself, the more you'll actually get out of it.
Okay, this whole process sounds like it could genuinely change how someone thinks. What are some of the big benefits people might notice if they stick with it?
Oh, the benefits can be really significant. First off, you get much better metacognition.
Thinking about thinking.
Right. You start noticing your own patterns, how you tend to form beliefs, where you might be less critical, what kinds of arguments sway you.
Increased self-awareness about your own mind.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Second, you develop more calibrated confidence. You get better at matching your level of certainty to the actual strength of the evidence.
So, less likely to be rigidly certain about shaky ideas or overly doubtful about solid ones.
Exactly. It helps avoid both overconfidence and excessive skepticism, which in turn tends to reduce dogmatism.
Makes sense.
By regularly questioning yourself, you build intellectual humility, that sense that, hey, I could be wrong, and being willing to change your mind.
That's huge.
You also start applying more consistent standards, using the same level of scrutiny for beliefs you like versus ones you don't.
Avoiding those double standards we all sometimes fall into.
Right. And all of this just fuels personal growth. You track your thinking's evolution, you understand yourself better intellectually. Plus, since our actions stem from beliefs, better beliefs often lead to better decisions.
Okay, wow. Better decisions too.
And it helps you spot and tackle cognitive biases, things like confirmation bias, where you only look for evidence that agrees with you. The journal makes you confront those.
Yeah, forces you to look at the other side.
And maybe the biggest thing is fostering greater intellectual honesty. Just being willing to ask yourself the hard questions about why you really believe something.
Those are really powerful outcomes. Now, beyond these core elements, Are there other things people could layer in for even deeper reflection as they get more used to journaling?
Yeah, absolutely. As you get comfortable, you can add more layers. One is paying attention to the emotional side.
Emotions and beliefs.
Definitely. How do you feel about this belief? Strong emotions can sometimes be a flag that maybe identity or values are more involved than pure evidence.
Interesting, like a little warning signal.
Could be. Also, think about social influences. Who influenced this belief? Family, friends, culture. Recognizing those roots gives context.
That social dimension is so often invisible to us.
It really is. And think about the practical impact. How does holding this belief actually affect your life, your choices, your behavior?
Connecting beliefs to actions.
And deliberately try inhabiting multiple perspectives. Really try to argue from another point of view, even temporarily.
Stretching your mental muscles.
For sure. You could even explore different epistemological frameworks more deeply. We mentioned reliabilism, but you could look into different takes on truth, like moderate absolutism or how context shapes knowing.
Broadening the philosophical toolkit, so to speak.
Exactly. And make it a habit to seek out good quality challenges to your views. Don't shy away from them.
Lean into the discomfort.
Identify triggers. What specific event or info would make you revisit a certain belief. And maybe even talk about some entries with trusted friends. Getting outside feedback can be invaluable.
Wow. Okay. This paints a picture of a really rich, ongoing self-inquiry.
Looking for clarity in a world full of questions? Head over to navigatingbeliefs.com and grab your free course today.
You mentioned a template earlier that helps structure this. Can you maybe highlight a few key sections from that template and why they're particularly useful?
Yeah, the template really helps guide the process. The belief statement section, for instance, just reinforces that need for clarity and precision right at the start. The domain of belief section asks you to categorize it scientific, moral, personal, etc. Because, as you said, different domains often have different standards of evidence.
Right. You wouldn't use the same proof for a math theorem as for a moral claim.
Exactly. That origin and development is where you trace that history, when, from whom, how it changed. That context is revealing.
Understanding the belief's biography.
Precisely. Evidence and reasoning is where you lay your cards on the table. What actually supports this? And you need to be honest about the quality of that evidence.
No bluffing yourself.
Definitely not. Belief formation methods is crucial. Identifying all the ways you got there. Was it research, intuition, authority, experience? List them all.
Okay.
Because that leads directly into the reliability assessment. Here's where you rate each of those methods, 1 to 10, and explain why you gave that rating.
Connecting confidence to the method's trustworthiness again.
Spot on. Which then informs the confidence level section, where you state your 0-100% and explain the reasoning, linking it back to that reliability assessment.
Making the confidence score meaningful, not just a gut feeling.
Exactly. Then counter evidence and alternative views that's vital for humility, forcing you to engage with opposing arguments seriously.
Steel manning again.
Yep. The outsider test pushes that perspective shift we talked about. Falsifiability asks that tough question. What specifically would make me reconsider?
What evidence would actually change my mind? That's a big one.
It is. Emotional investment acknowledges that feelings play a role. Practical impact looks at real-world consequences. Reflection notes is a catch-all for other thoughts. And the review section tracks the evolution over time.
It really covers all the bases for a thorough self-examination. So, any final tips for people to make this really effective, especially if they're aiming for those deeper insights or those aha moments?
I think cultivating certain intellectual virtues is key. Practice honesty with yourself, humility about possibly being wrong, curiosity to keep learning, fairness to opposing views, and courage to change your mind when the evidence points that way.
The classic intellectual virtues.
They're classic for a reason. Also, be actively aware of those common biases, confirmation bias, motivated reasoning, social pressure, sticking with the status quo, protecting your identity. Knowing about them helps you spot them in yourself.
Forewarned is forearmed against bias.
Kind of. And keep engaging with those frameworks, reliability, different perspectives on truth, context. It keeps your thinking flexible and rigorous.
Some fantastic advice there. So just to wrap things up, what's the absolute core takeaway about why someone might want to do this? What's the power of the belief journal?
The main idea, I think, is that it's a really powerful tool for building self-awareness and driving your own intellectual growth. It gives you a structured way to consciously examine the very foundations of how you understand the world, your beliefs.
And the end goal of all that examination.
It's really about achieving more calibrated confidence, confidence that actually matches the evidence. It's about reducing the sway of biases and developing a more consistent, more thoughtful way of reasoning about, well, everything.
For anyone listening who's feeling inspired to actually start this journey, you mentioned there's a template and guide available.
Yes, that's right. Rational Ruminations has put together the belief journal template we've been discussing, plus a detailed reference guide. If this conversation sparked your interest, we definitely encourage you to check those resources out.
Excellent. We'll make sure listeners know where to find that. And maybe a final thought for everyone listening, including Darren. Just pick one belief, one thing you feel pretty strongly about. What might happen if you really sat down and went through this process, documenting its origins, the real evidence you have for it? And maybe the most probing question, does how strongly you believe it really line up with how reliable the way you formed that belief actually was?
That's a question that can lead to some fascinating places.
Definitely something to chew on. Keep exploring those beliefs.